Well, you asked for it, and now you get it. In a previous video discussing the life of mech warriors and all the trials, tribulations, and suffering that those poor mech jockeys go through, I mentioned I might talk about other short topics like the various ghost mechs and spooky shenanigans that happen on the fringes of Battletech's universe. And that is by far the most asked about topic in the comments to become another video, so strap in lads, time to get spooky, relatively easy, relatively funny, so I'll hammer this video out in between editing my next major one with Steve. Considering that the official stance on Battletech is that there's as much magic in it as real life, people generally don't expect horror, spooks, and supernatural shenanigans. But despite that, there have been numerous strange, questionably canon happenings in the Battletech universe that can only be chalked up to miracles, ghosts, or something darker, far more malicious. We're going to be starting with things that are a little lighter and gradually working into the more violent, scary, depraved, and in my opinion, spookiest thing Battletech has to offer. And before you write to rush something about it, come on, wait at least until we get to it before writing a comment. Not everybody knows about the Lovecraftian murder monster, so don't let them come onto the video and immediately see 1,000 comments giving it away. I'm also asking that all of the Turbo Nerds just kind of accept that I'm intentionally going to get some of the lore wrong and mix up the timeline and stuff a bit, because I mean, really, we're talking about ghost stories. I'm here to entertain, not bore you with the dry lore and unimportant details like dates, names, and specifically who did what, where, and when. And to start with, let's go with number 13. An ancient battle mech, a Zeus, supposedly the 13th ever built, where it gets its name from. The first aspect of why it's not quite right is the neurohelmet and the remnants of dead pilots. There are plenty of ghost stories and tall tales in Battletech where some part of a mech warrior lives on in their mech. The machine interfaces so closely with the brain that flashes of memory and personality are left behind, stored in the machine's data centers. There's no proof of this, of course, outside individual accounts of pilots hearing what sounds like laughter or callouts or speaking that nobody else does over the comm chatter. Unlucky 13 here act a little different. You see, fighting, moving, responding to things, it just doesn't quite add up to what you would expect from the pilot in charge of number 13. Nothing is reported amiss during fights, but once cautious mech warriors are now bounding into the thick of the fighting, or brash brawlers suddenly find themselves sniping at minuscule targets with great success, often reporting after the battle that they were getting phantom readings on their scopes of enemies that weren't there, or hearing comms chatter from units that didn't exist. In extreme cases, where mech warriors would be injured, it seems like 13 refused to stop fighting. The voices of multiple people would overwhelm the delirious or injured pilot, and in a haze, they would report after battle that someone else besides them was sitting in the pilot's seat or in the cockpit. During the events of the story where we find out about 13, a new pilot finds the mech unclaimed, because everyone else has the heebie-jeebies because of it. As if compelled when seeing it for the first time, he walks forwards in a trance to touch the mech, hearing the faint sound of someone familiar before he was interrupted and pulled his hand back. Once in the actual hot seat, the pilot hears that strange voice again while checking its systems and gearing up for a test drive. This time, though, the voice is revealed to be his sister, sitting on the dash of the mech while he pilots it and holding a conversation with him and questioning him about his decisions and choices. The pilot is profoundly confused afterwards and brushes it off, refusing to talk about it, because his sister has been dead for years. Yet the conversation was as natural and normal and lighthearted as breathing. Nothing seemed amiss to him. It was perfectly normal in the moment to be talking to this thing. And in the coming engagement with Word of Blake forces, Unlucky 13 pops the fuck off. The mech flawlessly targets enemy forces, slamming weapons fire into the most vital and exposed areas of enemy mechs time and again. Glitches in the targeting computer throw off the pilot's aim, only for the enemy to dodge or swerve directly into the new path and suffer crippling damage. Whispers or words at the edges of the pilot's hearing demand that the pilot does something, only for it to turn out that that action saved his mech and life. Multiple aerospace fighters and jump jet mechs are knocked out of the skies. Enemy tanks and heavies are ran down or run through like they're unable to stop this murderous Zeus on a rampage. Eventually, alongside another unit, the pilot and 13 surround the Blakist forces and on 3 sides rip them apart as the Blakes are desperately trying to retreat. And the entire time, he's got his sister sitting shotgun in the cockpit, talking to him, calming him down, having a conversation with him. And by the end, the pilot had performed incredibly, though he was questioned as to who he was exactly talking to in the cockpit, as he'd been on an open comm channel raving like a lunatic. His squad, though, collectively agreed that if he could fight like that, he's free to talk to ghosts as much as he wants. And 13 is an interesting story made all the better by the fact that the mech's performance seems to hinge on the threat it's fighting. There's hints and suggestions that since 13 is an ancient Star League Zeus, still painted with the colors and sporting a tarnished Cameron star, the Blakists were the biggest threat to the people of the Inner Sphere, and its duty was to protect the people of the Inner Sphere. And its pilot was hell-bent on protecting people above his loyalty to anything else, even his unit and liege lord. The only reason he was even taking up mech warrioring again to go fight people is because he felt obligated to protect those from the Blakist jihad that couldn't protect themselves. Maybe the pilot was simply insane. After having suffered a severe mental breakdown sometime earlier, he was just getting back into things and finally sitting in a mech cockpit again. And the sight and voice of his sister may have just been the aftershocks of his broken mind playing tricks on him mid-combat. Even if it was him losing his mind, nobody could really explain how his performance equaled an entire lance of battle mechs all by himself. The story of 13 is a little creepy, a little bit up there, but it's overall a benevolent ghost story. But what about something a little more, violent, and a little more Scottish? Well, we've got Great Gaffas' Ghost. A funny name, but I promise you, if you see General Gaffa in his Highlander... Alright, you get one. People really like the bagpipe meme from the Highlander video, so you get one. I'll let Steve know going forwards that he gets one bagpipe each video if I drop the H word by accident. Getting back on track though, if you see General Gaffa and his brilliantly painted Star League Highlander, your life is already over, as this ghost is far more violent and supernaturally powerful than 13 was, and filled with nothing but hate, and a psychopathic, grandfatherly protective streak, it would seem. General James Gaffa was a famed mech warrior of his age, leading Star League units from the front in his vibrant green Highlander, a Cameron star on one shoulder and a bright 05 number on the other. Any battle that James Gaffa was in would devolve into a slaughter, as the man was frankly a menace, coring enemy mechs with his Gauss rifle or battering them to scrap with his missiles or burying them with the classic Highlander burial, of which he was particularly skilled. James Gaffa met his end in rage when he was specifically targeted for assassination, and was last heard cursing life as an entire regiment of battle mechs bore down on him from all sides. The signature of a reactor breach was assumed to be the end of General Gaffa. He was listed as missing in action though, as no wreckage or body was ever recovered, and the only thing that was left at the ambush site was his dead lancemates and the burning hulks of multiple enemy mechs. From that point on, legends of a green ghost started cropping up. A mysterious Highlander painted in flawless Star League colors appearing from nowhere, crushing opponents in seconds and disappearing just as fast. In one case, a mech warrior crippled by a surprise death from above watched as an enemy Phoenix Hawk lined up its weapons with their cockpit, and injured, delirious, waiting for death, this mech warrior watched as the enemy's weapons charged, only for the Phoenix Hawk to explode, a barrage of missile fire and Gauss slugs ripping it apart before the bulk of a Highlander smashed into it. The most famous example of Great Gaffa's ghost appearing to kick the shit out of people, though, was a nasty case of clanner infestation. Barton Vale, fighting Clan Smoke Jaguar on the world of Virantofta, was experiencing his first and last battle, which, ouch, oof, rushed through mech warrior training and your first battle is against the clans, that's gotta suck. Anyways, deployed in a bushwhacker, Barton ran smack into a clan star of mechs. The gyroscope of his own vehicle was crippled in an opening shot from the clanners before his cockpit was hit moments later. His mech was crippled and barely even able to respond to his commands. Not like he could really give any, as one of his arms had been blown clean off, the other arm was shattered by the impact, and his chest and hips were more broken and fragmented than solid. In excruciating pain and delirious, he watched as a green Highlander, with a fury and efficiency he'd never seen before, rip into the first mech about to kill him. It exploded instantly. The next clanner to turn and try to engage this new Highlander found its cockpit instantly crumpled and crushed under the weight of a fist. The next cut to pieces under laser fire. On and on it went, the Highlander systematically taking apart every clanner like they were made of styrofoam, ripping the limbs off of their vehicles and discarding them battered and broken, smote upon the mountainside for salvagers to find later on. And then, as suddenly as it had appeared and devastated a star of clan mechs, it was gone. Our lucky mech warrior that's been seen by the angry grandpa does manage to survive, as reinforcements reacted quickly to what they thought was a clan assault, showing up in force. Barton received immediate medical attention and was heralded as a hero who fought off and defeated the clan mechs alone, though his ammo bins were full and his lasers showed no signs of being fired. Barton maintained until the day he died that he hadn't done anything, but few believed his tall tale of a Highlander, of which no records existed of one operating in the area. The interesting thing about Gaffas' ghost is, unlike 13, which seems to be connected to the people of the Star League, or the Inner Sphere in general, Gaffas' ghost is specifically attached to James Gaffas' descendants and spiritual successors in the Northwind Highlanders, in some cases manifesting for hours at a time, like one instance where Gaffas' 05 Highlander carried a wounded pilot dozens of miles to a medical aid station, saving her life by literally setting her down on the ground from its hand the moment that it was unobserved, disappearing, not even leaving footsteps behind as to where it had gone. So yeah, Gaffas' ghost, a really pissed off Scottish battle grandpa protecting his great, that's a lot of greats, grandkids, and he picked a kick-ass mech to do it in. And that brings us to what many people think of as the pinnacle of spooky, scary, ghosty mech shenanigans, the Black Marauder. Firstly, whatever this demonic ass-grabbing monster is, it picked the single best mech to troll people with, in my opinion. The Marauder is aggressive-looking, angular, boating large and very clear weapons. It's great, even used by the bounty hunter for how deadly it is. Great choice for a murder monster. But the thing about the Black Marauder, and why people put it up there as the scariest ghost mech thing in the setting, is because unlike what we know about the others, the Black Marauder is a mystery. It's truly alien, and goddamn has it had the most skin-crawlingly what the fuck moments when it shows up in the literature. Well, let's start at the beginning. The Black Marauder didn't appear. It was found. After the Fourth Succession War, during a routine transit from a mission to a jump ship, a unit of the Federated Commonwealth pinged a signal from a nearby moon. Investigating, they found the Black Marauder, shut down, stationary, alone, sitting on this dead, airless moon with no signs of travel or movement. There weren't even any footprints in the lunar dust. It was like it simply appeared there out of nowhere. Not to look a gift horse in the mouth, the unit took the Marauder along with them as just another weapon to use, but immediately after, things began to go very wrong. Seemingly rare phenomena and problems began happening with impossible frequency. The crew that had brought it aboard were distressed, to say the least, unnerved and feeling dread in the pit of their stomach just by being around it. Mech techs trying to fix its dodgy leg would suffer injuries and accidents that shouldn't have been possible. Myomer strands twitching due to an incomplete shutdown and slicing fingers off, or the harness giving way and letting the mech's weight drop on a tech's arm, crushing it. And when they eventually made a jump out system, something happened. No one knows what, and everyone who witnessed or experienced it couldn't remember anything, but during the brief fraction of a second the jump took, when the ship disappeared from regular reality to reappear somewhere else, everyone in proximity experienced a near breakdown, while the ship in total, everyone, had a heavy bout of fear and anxiety. One unfortunate man, immediately upon completing the jump, walked to the nearest airlock and jettisoned himself out into space, mysteriously able to override every safety in the moment it took for anyone to notice. While in the long-term use of one Kevin Langstrom, the mech warrior would commit murders, stashing the bodies of his victims in the Black Marauder's armored housings, hiding them from any of the mech techs, and oddly enough, by stashing the corpse in the leg of the Marauder, it finally fixed the dodgy leg that thing had. Eventually, Langstrom became so violent, so unpredictable, that during a battle, he went insane, slaughtering everyone and destroying everything in a city on Atarian world. refusing orders to withdraw or hold fire. Even after a fellow mech warrior confronted him, he simply turned with his mech and almost unnaturally bent its arm to the side, ripping his opponent's cockpit to shred and killing him instantly. Eventually, abandoned and surrounded by pirates and scavengers of all things, the outlaws threatened to turn him in for court-martial and execution, either to the Federated Commonwealth or the Taurians, whom he'd been butchering. His other choice was to join up with them and get to pirating. He agreed, and immediately killed the pirates' leader, effortlessly blasting the mech out from under him and taking control of the group, threatening to kill all of them one by one if they didn't fall in line. Eventually, though, his brutality caught up with him, so much so that even his new, morally scrupulous allies decided that they were going to betray him because he was simply so unhinged and violent. When they eventually did, simply murdered his way out. In the chaos, somehow he'd even managed to chain multiple civilians to his mech as living shields, each one of them screaming, shrieking with what looked far more like agony than terror. Returning to his base to confront the arch-traitor, Langstrom wasn't piloting his mech. He walked, casually, slowly on foot towards Ravion, a pirate king and warlord who had orchestrated the betrayal. Manic, almost insane, but utterly confident, because behind him, with its canopy open, no visible pilot, nothing connecting Langstrom to the mech that would suggest a wireless control interface, behind him walked the Black Marauder, matching Langstrom's pace, its arms and back-mounted cannons eagerly and swiftly switching between potential targets, almost twitching, almost alive in its movements. Black Kevin demanded of the pirates that they provide him with information and some of their most valuable treasures. Star League-era star charts, maps, experiments, and tests, information on anything he could get his hands on. Rambling and barely coherent, the last thing that they heard from Langstrom before he disappeared off the face of the inner sphere was that he was looking for something. A place, or a planet, or a point where the old Star League had accidentally punched a hole into somewhere beyond. But even after his disappearance and decades of silence, the Black Marauder continued to haunt the Inner Sphere, only getting worse with time. It would appear in the worst fighting across the Inner Sphere, not by number of dead or number of combatants, but worst by the cruelty and casual destruction. Atrocities, war crimes, slaughter drew the Marauder. When it appeared, it had a flair for the dramatic, materializing like smoke or inky flowing shadows at the edges of someone's vision amidst the fighting, and before anyone could identify the thing staring back at them from the smoke, it would engage. And often the only thing you would know about its appearance on a battlefield was the smoldering wrecks and corpses of the men and women who died screaming as they saw it. But the Black Marauder also appears to be sadistically inclined as a form of entertainment, as its favorite method of appearing is to individuals as it walks out of the darkness by itself. A dark night, a lone patrolman doing his rounds at the edges of his unit, and at first it was a faint signal, the approach of an unknown mech, a power signal that the sensors picked up. Then it was the thumping, the heavy, slow footsteps, and yet it was like nothing was even there, but all of the mech's sensors were screaming that something should be. Shining your mech's lights out into the dark only seemed to make the blackness all the more consuming. And out of it, stretching and wrong, fundamentally wrong on some level, as every neuron in your body screams that something isn't right, as if the darkness itself was clawing at the edges of the Black Marauder, trying to hold it. The thing that appeared as, but simply couldn't be a Marauder, walked out of the dark, firing its weapons with deadly accuracy, the flash the only thing that illuminates it, and waiting just long enough for you to scream over your comms for help before you died. And speaking of its appearance, the Black Marauder is wrong. After Langstrom disappeared, every reported sighting of the mech only contorts and twists it further. People who see it say that it's almost malformed, that the proportions are wrong somehow, but they can't exactly explain how or why they know that. First-hand reports of it fighting say that the mech moves in a way that shouldn't be possible. Not for a mech, it's too fluid, too smooth, too uncanny. The most impressive single example of the Black Marauder's power was a run-in with a star of clan mech warriors, the best that the setting has to offer. 2 Vipers and 3 Summoners, a genuinely terrifying group. And when they were found after the battle, the 2 Vipers had been cored, ripped apart, while 2 of the Summoners were surgically decapitated, one of the Black Marauder's arms targeting each one and killing them like it was target practice, obliterating their cockpits and the pilot. But for the star leader, the only one that seemed to be able to put up a fight, his summoner was found in a strange state, frozen upright, as if it were still in the middle of combat. Weapons locked on something in front of it that wasn't there, missiles primed, lasers about to fire, everything ready. The strangest part, though, was that the cockpit canopy was entirely undamaged, unharmed, and yet the pilot was just missing, with no signs of exit from the vehicle. Like something had simply reached into it and plucked him out of reality. And even stranger is that each of the summoner's arms had been removed. Myomer bundles snapped, while internals and armor hanged from the sides of the machine crumpled and dented, as if something monstrous had grabbed each of the summoner's limbs, held it in place, and then ripped them free with tremendous force. And the worst depiction, the worst first-hand account that left a man a broken, gibbering mess, was after witnessing the Black Marauder kill everyone around him, shrugging off or dodging return fire like it wasn't even there, like it was made of smoke. The thing turned to leave, fading into the inky blackness it had writhed its way free from as it started to fade away, and turned the head that the mech didn't have, staring with eyes that it shouldn't have, and grinning a rictus, mirthful smirk with the teeth that it couldn't have at the last surviving person to see the scene of carnage. And that scene, made by Tychorian Draws on Twitter, or X now, I guess. And isn't this just a horrific depiction of the Black Marauder? Jesus Christ. And that brings us pretty much to the end of the video. Now, this is far from an exhaustive list, but I figured I would showcase the most interesting ghost stories and some of the most fleshed out, with like one for each category of good, very violent but kind of good, and then absolutely awful. But there are more, like the Calandra Witch, a desert specter that haunts the clans during the invasion of a world by the same name, appearing out of dust storms in a mech covered with skulls and esoteric symbols to kill clanners before fading away into the dust storm. We've got the Hikagamano, which is a discarded and abandoned mech, responsible for killing multiple pilots in freak accidents the moment that they get into the thing and turn it on, but a mech that bonds with a similarly outcast mech warrior that actually cares for and talks to the thing. And, of course, there's the Broken, a monster of entirely human design that didn't quite fit because it's not a ghost story. A canon monster, by the way, that has the potential to end all life wherever it goes if it isn't stopped. But since it's not a ghost and I could potentially make a similarly sized video on it, I'll simply leave it here for anyone to explore and learn about. And I reiterate, when you look up Necromo Nightmares, it's all canon, it's all real, and it's very much up to whether or not the roleplay group succeeded, because if they didn't, then the Broken gets free, and there's nothing that can stop it. Not really. And that brings me to the actual end of the video. If you've managed to make it this far, you are very clearly the target audience of Turbo Nerd, so why not consider helping the channel out by leaving a like, subscribe, comment down below, ring the bell, all that good stuff so you'll be notified of new videos and kind of help me fight back against the algorithm. Or if you're feeling generous, we've got a Patreon where you can throw a few dollars at my Staying Alive fund. If you just want to hang out, then Sai also has a Discord linked down below, and I stream on Twitch every Saturday doing various sci-fi stuff. And to all of the generous people already supporting the channel, a huge thanks to the arms dealers providing all the toys and tools that we got to explore in this video. Thank you very much. The Black Marauder is still looking at me from outside my apartment, and I can't get it to leave. No matter where I park it, it always shows back up. Or the food merchants, making sure that I am always stocked up and that starvation is a faraway foe I shall hopefully never have to deal with. And lastly but not leastly, the coffee vendors, making sure that my war on sleep is ever productive. One day I shall never sleep again. Thank you all very much for your support. And with that, I got nothing else to say. Outros are hard. Goodbye.